Welcome everybody here in the room. Nice to see you all. Welcome to techUK and also to colleagues joining online. This is our second of our Meet the CEO, I think is the theme. I'm Julian David, I'm CEO here at techUK. Most of you know what techUK does and what techUK is, but for those that are new to us, because we have made this an open event, Vivek, so people can find out more about you and your company. techUK is the trade association for digital tech companies in the UK, but also beyond that. We have 940 member companies in our membership. If any of you are from a company that's not in membership, then I hope by the end of this conversation, you'll change your mind and join. But among our members, and I'm absolutely delighted to have the chance to talk to you, Vivek, is Vivek and his company, NTT. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the company, a little bit about Vivek's role and style as leader, explore some of the issues facing us all as tech solution providers, our customers, our stakeholders, and then maybe a little look into the future. What do we think is going to come next? So you'll see me looking at some areas, topics that we want to talk about, but there's also the opportunity as we reach the end of our discussion, Vivek, to open up a little bit.
Sure.
Some questions from the floor and also questions online, which Sue will attempt to select from, because there's usually more questions than we have time for, but hopefully that will be fine. So look, Vivek, welcome. Thank you very much for coming today, taking the time to talk to us. And it's really very much a little bit of discovery for us about. Let's start a little bit perhaps with NTT, because NTT is one of the really well established and significant players in the tech industry. Obviously, originally from Japan, but now very global. And I suspect, like most of the people joining in today, we all know NTT, but maybe we don't really. If we're asked, well, where do they start and where do they stop? We probably say, because of the name, comms. Yeah. But that's not really the whole story, is it? So maybe you could just talk a little bit about, what is the scope of NTT and what do you guys deliver for your customers and stakeholders?
As long as you promise to ask me about me afterwards.
I will do.
Talk about NTT.
Yeah, actually, that's true. This is supposed to be about you.
Oh, okay.
So, well, just skim over NTT then, and then we'll get to you.
No, let's start with NTT then. So I'll start with a little known fact, and then I'll go on to a fun fact.
Okay.
And then I might even add a mind-boggling fact.
Okay. All right.
So Kantar Brands, renowned media outfit, right? They study brands around the world. They recently published their 2023 list of the most valuable brands in Japan. They do this every year. I could do a quick quiz, but let me kind of start with which one do you think is the #1 most valuable brand in Japan? And they obviously happen to be global mega brands, but any guesses on which is the first?
It's got to be Sony.
No? Toyota. Toyota's #1. So if I kind of just keep going, I kind of know the entire list of 10, but let me just pick some more. Some more. Number 6 is Sony's #3, by the way, so not far off. Number 6 is Uniqlo. Everyone. Yeah. Number 7 is Honda. Number 8 is Nintendo. It's still there. Number 10 is Nissan. And the thing that, when I talk to my friends, even new joiners, and I ask them about the most valuable brands, and when I kind of get to the punchline, they're absolutely amazed, or if not shocked, that the #2 most valuable brand in Japan is NTT. Right? Little known fact. They were also #2 last year, although the top 10 has moved around quite a bit from 22 to 23. So it's quite remarkable, right? Obviously, NTT is not a consumer brand, but the fact that it sits among the who's who of global brands, says something about the value creation and the innovation that NTT drives. So that's the little known fact, the fun fact. Pretty much everyone who uses a smartphone uses a bit of technology that was invented by NTT. So in DocoMoSat, a designer named Kurita-san, who designed the emoji. So NTT is also the inventor of the emoji. For better or for worse, right? Not everyone may. But that's sort of the fun fact. So let me talk a bit about NTT Group then. So NTT Group obviously headquartered out of Japan, $110 billion corporation, global corporation, 300,000 people around the world. At the heart of it, a technology and telecoms business. There are a number of brands that sit inside Japan, and there are some brands that sit outside Japan. In that, there are two flagship international IT services brands. One is NTT Limited, where I work, and the other is NTT Data. NTT Data operates more at the sort of application data engineering level, and NTT Limited operates more at the infrastructure, network level, and talk a bit more about that. But back to the group for a minute, right? So NTT Group then, what's special? I think at the heart of NTT Group's ethos and just the purpose of the group really is really focused around societal impact. And if you go onto their website, you'll see we talk about Society 5.0, which is the next version of how we've come through. What are the let me see if I can test myself to remember Society 1.0 to 4.0. But the idea of going from a hunting a world many decades and eons ago when we were hunting society, to one where we were an agrarian society, to one where we became an industrial society, and then became an information society. The question is, what next, right? What is the nature and shape of society? 5.0, obviously, in that, did I count 4? I think I did. So the whole notion of that is around technology for good and technology to shape the future of society and humanity. And what is NTT's role in that, right? So we see ourselves as the architects of the modern world through technology. So therefore, $3.6 billion of R&D investment every year from NTT Group goes into things like what is the future and the path to the next generation of photonics communications, for example. And how does that impact society? And how does that create innovation and unleash human potential? Let's look at mind-boggling fact, right? I said one more fact. So mind-boggling fact. NTT Research has started work, they announced it last year, I think late last year, has started research on building a solar farm in space. Right? Because the challenge we have around energy consumption and energy that is sustainable, it can't just be met by more power plants with coal and gas and everything else. So really creating that sustainable model for solar farms of the future. And there's a very cool video on that. Just it's on YouTube. So if you look it up, there's a reporter who's done an in-depth visit and talk about what NTT Research are doing in this space. And it's fascinating, right? Just to understand even the thinking of what leads to, what the thinking that leads to that kind of project. I think that's where NTT Group, really brings the ethos of the group to bear on what it does. Now, if I go back to, so from the group, if I go to NTT Limited, where I'm at, so I lead the UK and Ireland business for NTT Limited. It's actually a new old company because it was formed only in July 2019 through the integration of multiple operating companies and acquisitions to create this one integrated brand. And within there sat different capabilities that we stitched together to create this new modern IT services business. So what do we do? Before that, just quick stats. So it's a $10 billion company globally. It's headquartered out of the UK. It has 36,000 employees worldwide. It is, as I said, a new old company. Therefore, a lot of what's happened since the integration has been about building new modern services and also simplifying our own business. Because no surprises when you bring together so many companies, right? You have to simplify yourself. So we're also, we have and we are doing a lot of work around what does it take to become the modern digital. I mean, we have to be digital to sell digital and to help clients be digital. What does that modern digital architecture and fabric look like? And a lot of work has happened. So we are going to be sort of client zero, if you will, in terms of our journey to get to where we are and where we go next. So what does NTT Limited do? I'll sort of give you two flavors. One is just the most simple, what are we good at and what do we specialize in? So from just a technology speak and just keep it simple, right? We specialize in data centers, infrastructure, we specialize in networks, in cloud, in security, in collaboration, and what we call software-defined infrastructure services. So that's kind of fine, but what does that actually mean in terms of value to companies and to customers? So if you look at it today, increasingly so, every company needs to store and secure their data, their applications. We provide the global backbone on top of which companies do that. So we have global networks and interconnected global data centers on which companies are able to operate their applications, their data, as well as connect their employees, connect their clients, connect their partners, run their operations and their supply chain. No company in the world now, unless you're obviously a corner shop, you still need Wi-Fi maybe, I don't know, depends. But pretty much every company now needs that backbone to operate their business. So we provide that backbone to start with. It's a backbone built on the back of a significant level of CapEx investment because these are not cheap to build. On top of that backbone, we then bring together our services and digital platform capabilities through which we provide services to clients for example, managing their networks, managing the infrastructure, managing multiple clouds, managing the security, enabling collaboration and hybrid working for their employees and with their clients, and doing all that in a secure by design manner. So this is very much a case of using the power of platforms, which essentially are another way of saying some very heavy degree of contextual automation through which we deliver these services. And we can do the full spectrum of the consult, design, migrate, and manage, right? That's what we do across all of those domains and more. And then last not least, I think on top of these, the digital backbone, the platform services, we then provide, and platform and managed services, I should say, we provide, and we continue to invest in building digital solutions. A good example would be, and I will cite one or two more fun facts in a bit, but good example is digital sports. It actually connects very strongly and very meaningfully to NTT's ethos around human experience, because sport is a very essential part of human experience. And how do you experience sport in the new modern era is something very interesting. So digital sports all the way to digital factories or smart factories to digital cities, right? We actually then have built platforms and capabilities through which we can enable all of those types of things. So it's a fascinating, a set of capabilities, assets, IP, and platforms. When you pull all those together, we are really showing up now to enable what most customers are looking for, right? They need to secure their workloads. They need to operate in different parts. So there's so many. Through COVID, we come through the C's, which is around, collaboration was a big C during COVID. Connectivity is a big C. So if you follow the thread of all of these capabilities, I think we are very meaningful, very topical, but we still are this new old brand. NTT's brand is very strong. NTT Limited is now showing up in the market, so that's fantastic. I do want to talk about just keeping with the theme of purpose. So I talked about NTT Group's purpose, and that permeates through all the operating companies. At NTT Limited, we describe our purpose in line with the United Nations. If you haven't heard of it, please go to look it up. United Nations have these SDGs. These are Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them. We subscribe to all 17 and support all 17. And NTT Limited is also what is known as a business avenger for goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. So It again speaks to our focus on purpose and our focus on impact. And then we take that alignment and then we enumerate our purpose in 3 dimensions. And we call them interconnected dimensions. Connected communities, connected economies, and connected planet. And that's where we see a role for ourselves in terms of, I have to kind of warn you, Julian, I'm a big movie fan, right? So we'll come to me in a minute, but so I'll keep on citing analogies, which I do with my team all the time. So those of you who are fans of The Matrix, right, there's this thing where, the question is asked, right, why are we here? And this is why NTT is here, right? This is NTT's purpose. We state our purpose as enabling a connected and sustainable future through technology and innovation in those 3 dimensions.
Right. Can I tease? I mean, that's a very broad mission, isn't it? And one that I doubt many people can argue with, but also a lot of people won't understand entirely.
Yep. Can
I tease out maybe a little bit? Is there a typical NTT customer from that? Is it enterprises? Is it smaller companies? Is it service providers that sit on top of what you do? What's the, for NTT Limited, what is that?
Great question. So I'll send you a check in the post. Thank you for taking that up. That was very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
sign up late. No, yeah.
Sign here. So no, it's a great question because given the breadth of what we do, actually the answer is many of those. So for instance, absolutely, what we would consider enterprise customers, businesses in all sectors, are clients.
Yeah.
Because we, as I said, we provide all the things I described. But we also, when you look at, for example, the hyperscalers, they're also our clients because they use our data center capacity.
Right.
So they're also clients. We are also partners for them because we work on their technologies to deliver services to clients. And then we also support, in line with our purpose and our ambition to make an impact, we also support innovative startups. Good example is, for a few years, we were the official technology partner for the Red Bull Basement program.
Right.
So if you haven't heard of it again, Red Bull, everyone knows what Red Bull is. So they run a program called Red Bull Basement, which is really about supporting and enabling young innovators who are at university on the premise that, if you have an idea, and it doesn't matter which discipline you're studying, it could be anyone. The program originally was set up in 2015 in Sao Paulo, by the way. It has evolved with time. Now it runs across several countries in the world. And it's basically, I guess, if I simplify it, it's sort of a gamification of innovation and ideation in the university level, and then allow students to kind of get a platform and some support through which they can take their ideas and actually build the prototype to an MVP and then beyond. So we were a technology partner there. And a good example is there was an NTT wildcard entry, as it's called, wildcard winner. It's called, it's a small, they're still looking for investors, by the way. Anyone interested, please go look them up. RoboOcean. So this was it started with a university student in Edinburgh who came across this, and he was very interested in sustainability and ecology. He came across this thing around seagrass.
Mm-hmm.
So seagrass, another topic to go look up.
Yeah.
It covers 0.1% of the ocean seabed, but actually stores within it, seagrass meadows within them, they store 11% of all carbon dioxide in the ocean. Why is that important? If they did not actually lock that carbon dioxide in, it would actually release into the atmosphere and actually increase, greenhouse gases and so forth. Over the last, I think it's about 70 years, I can't remember exactly, UK has lost 92% of all seagrass, 92%. And globally as well, right? The sea meadows, so sea meadows are basically the lungs of the ocean. And they are, because of a variety of reasons, you can imagine, right? They've been sort of collapsing. And so there's programs of, communities, organizations around the world looking to plant seagrass. But it's a very manual intensive thing and costs a lot of money. So this student and then some of his friends got together during COVID and came up with the idea of a robotic seagrass planter, which would go to the bottom of the ocean and plant seagrass. Right? So great idea. So these are the types of things where when we talk about purpose, I don't think every company has the headroom to invest all their resources in-house to do this type of thing, but you can be a champion and a sponsor. And so to your point about, in which spectrum do we operate? We operate in the spectrum from enterprises to innovative startups to partners who are also customers.
Okay. And governments as well, I'm sure.
Governments as well, yeah. So we work with some of the local authorities and local councils. We work with some NHS trusts. Our sister company, NTT Data, works with a number of central government departments.
Yeah.
Working with Gov is also an important part of our contribution in whichever country we operate. So we usually look for how can we make that happen. So yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to some of the things you've said there, Vivek, because there's a really interesting number of agendas to pull out, I think, for the people here and the people online. But maybe step back a bit, because I did promise this would be about you. And by the way, seagrass, I never heard of it. And then I thought, well, there are seahorses and they must eat something. So makes sense. But how did you get into tech and how did you end up here? Can you take us through that?
How long do you have?
Well, we have about 30 minutes, but we want to do some other stuff. So
no, absolutely, I will not bore anyone with being vain and talk about myself. But I'll So when I started out, right, I've grown up in an era when there weren't so many TV channels and streaming media, and there were only a few channels on TV. And the real way to fuel your imagination was through books and comics.
Okay.
And even now, I feel strongly that there's a lot to be said about, the human imagination, where you can actually take a comic and amplify the story in your own head and fill in the blanks. Right? Today, it's the opposite, right? You almost need to find a way to not do that. So I grew up at that era, and books were a big part. Sports was a big part of growing up. And I want to cite, I always take the opportunity to cite a book or a movie if I can. So I'll cite a couple of books. I'll actually do another mini quiz. So this book was based on the first 4 parts of a radio talk show in UK. The book itself was launched in October 1979. And by all accounts, in the first 3 months, at that time, it sold 250,000 copies. In there is the idea of, and I'm also a sci-fi fan, so there's the idea of an alien race that comes and builds a supercomputer called Deep Thought. 1979. 1979. Those of you who have guessed, right? And then that computer is given the question of, it has only one purpose, to find out the meaning of everything, right? And then after 7.5 million years of computation, it comes up with that one answer. The meaning of everything is the number 42. Don't ask me, right? But that's kind of the book. So by now, any guesses? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? So I was just, I read it in the 80s some point. And
that was what pulled you in, was it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of them. I mean, I read any number of things. And the other one was completely at the other end of the spectrum, was a trilogy written in 1954. Of course, Lord of the Rings, right? So so I was very enthused by the idea of, it's about how you use your imagination. So for me, that was a big part of growing up. Now, coming to your question about my journey, it was either go find a way to write some books, which I don't think I had the talent to write those kinds of books, or to get into sports, which I think is probably true of most kids of that age, right? So, but then I think I spent a lot of my waking hours playing basketball. And then at some point I realized I'm not growing taller. So ruled that out as a career choice. So then I simplified the whole thing, right? What did I really want to do? For me, it was very simple. When I was just starting out, I wanted to see the world, experience new cultures, travel. It was as simple as that. There was no grand ambition of being in tech. It was just, what can I do to get me the chance to travel and see the world? And then I found the ticket was actually in IT because you could travel the world. So long story short, then in the good old days of COBOL, CAKES, DB2, and mainframe, I ended up doing a project in the US out in the city of Chicago. Worked there. Next, I moved on to Connecticut. Then I moved all the way across to Sydney, Australia. Was back in the US, and then eventually landed up in the UK in 2001. Along the way, it became home because you can only be a nomad for so long, right? Along the way, I got married, we had kids, so it was I still travel a lot, but grew roots here. So, and I think a lot of what I've done is based on life experiences. You work with different cultures. Australia, for example, the project I did there, the CIO was Greek, the architect was Dutch, the CFO was British, the lead business owner was Aussie. So it's just working in different cultures, different environments. It's just been the biggest learning of all. And also, I think for me, how did I get to where I am? By defaulting to the idea that the best ideas are not mine. And really working with a lot of smart people, right? I mean, that's what makes it work. So it's just been a great journey of learning. I think I'm a lifelong student. Work with people as best as I can, because I think end of the day, we spend too many hours at work to not have the camaraderie, the sense of working together as one and enjoying it the best we can. And that's been the journey. So eventually, right, all along that, I had the great privilege of working with three great technology companies, IT services companies. I worked with TCS, Cognizant, IBM, and now I'm working with another great company, NTT. So it's been a journey of learning. Technology has changed tremendously. Mainframe is still around, but I could put on my leather jacket and start coding in mainframe. But that's not the time. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I got to where I am.
So look, mainframe is definitely around. Some people know I'm an IBM, ex-IBM person many years ago, but yeah, the mainframe is still around. But it's interesting because thinking about that sports interest and thinking about the imagination and thinking about travel. Let me ask a question. When you think about us techies, do you immediately think of people who travel a lot, are interested in sport, and have great imagination? And I know there's some techies here.
I knew there was something wrong with me.
Yeah, but that's interesting, isn't it? Because people don't understand that the tech has got to be creative or it's nothing. It's got to be creative to address problems. It's got to be creative to bring new things into being.
Yeah, I think the idea of, look, every company, especially when you become a large enterprise and you've gone through M&A and so forth, has some very serious challenges around legacy technology, complexity, and those types of things. These are not trivial. And you ask a dyed-in-wool CIO, and then I'm sure there's a market out there for a schizophrenia pill for CIOs, right? Because they have a schizophrenic sort of ask from the business: cut costs, drive digital transformation, and drive growth, and do them at the same time, and do that yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's not easy, but I think we are in a time where there isn't the headroom to be linear. Doesn't mean that you can just make things happen by wishing for them, but I think you have to run multiple races, right?
Yeah.
A single race can't be the only race you run. Also, I think technology now enables you to do things that I think start to break the idea of linearity. You still have to build the foundation. I don't want to trivialize that topic. Actually, techUK is doing some fantastic work to spotlight, among the many things that you do, a topic that I think a lot of people don't understand because it's not kind of in the public domain, in that consciousness of front of mind consciousness, which is what's going to happen with PSTN lines. Right?
Yeah.
All PSTN lines will be switched off by 2025 and replaced with voice over IP. Companies don't even know what they're running stuff on.
No.
Right? And they're kind of, once you move to PSTN, think about before that replacement of equipment, supply of power. What happens if there's a power outage? So that's the foundational thing that affects critical national infrastructure, all the way to ATM cash machines, to
burglar alarms, everything.
Burglar alarms, refrigeration systems in supermarkets or chains, etc. So it's something that needs tackling. But then if that's the only thing you do, then you can't really bring the organization along on a new journey if you're only on that one,
You've
track.
got to also say, and the advantages and the new, what you can do that's different than new.
Yeah.
And often people don't do that, do they? They sort of, they come up with let's change from this technology to that, but we do the same thing.
Indeed, I think the one of the opportunities I think is really around partnering
Mm-hmm.
and sponsoring if you can't do it all yourself. Especially partnering. I think the world is now full of innovative companies in many, many domains. And it would be remiss of companies to think that, they have to invent it and it has to be built here.
Right.
I mean, what you can do now to make 1 + 1 more than 2 is just incredible. I mean, you have to be prepared to partner. So NTT, again, one of the big themes for us is, right, partner first.
Right.
Because we are innovative, that's great. But, the way we can amplify what we do is through partnerships.
And that's one of the things I'm interested in as well, Vivek. We learned a bit about you, but I know a fun fact as well, that you're a Chelsea fan.
Oh,
It hasn't been so much fun this year, has it? But you've had a lot of fun. I mean, I'm a West Ham fan, so come on, you're not going to get any sympathy here, mate. But this whole point about technology, and you're really alluding to it, it's people that make this stuff, and people are notoriously difficult, aren't they? And culture is a big challenge. And you've outlined a purpose for NTT. You've talked about your approach to this. Give me a perspective maybe on that old saying that culture eats organization or strategy for breakfast. How do you go about managing a culture and bringing change to that culture, both for you and for your customers?
With great difficulty. I think it's a great question. I think the notion of culture, the idea of culture, has so many intersection points, right? Back to the why are we here, right? What's the organization's purpose, and how do people internalize that? What are people's aspirations in terms of what they want to accomplish? How do they want get together and collaborate to make things happen? Culture really is at the heart of all of that. But fundamentally, right, for me, I subscribe to the school of servant leadership, which for me is really about the traditional, if we talk about Society 5.0 and the different eras we've come through, we are clearly, right, well and truly beyond the era of traditional management and leadership. Right? We are in the era of how can you bring people together to accomplish something greater by thinking about what makes them the best version of themselves, and with no concern for yourself. Right? Just you are there to enable the success of others. A lot of organizations go through the trials and tribulations of different departments that are all targeted to do a certain thing. You have a target, you have a number. And if I take an archetype, I don't want to in any shape or form suggest that this is true of every company, but if I just take an example, say sales department, right? They've got a number to deliver.
Yeah.
And I'll use some caricaturization to make the point, right? Which is sales department probably thinks that the solution department, or solution team rather, doesn't really have the technical depth and the skill and the focus to build a really good differentiated solution. The solutioning team probably thinks that the sales department doesn't have any relationship with the client. The delivery team thinks they are both useless because they oversold and overpromised and left them holding the can. And you get some flavor of this everywhere, which is people are operating with their targets and their objectives. And the classic sort of, it's truly cliched, and a lot of people refer to it, but being truly client-centric is about how do you thread those objectives together with an external perspective of what matters to the client.
Yeah.
And engage in a way that you are one team, right? That's easier said than done. But what I have tried in different times and different guises is to really play the interloper and the person who outs the problem thing. You guys think this about those guys think this about you, and those guys think this thing about both of you. And people are like, thank God someone outed the problem, right? Because quite often organizations, people stop short of going the full distance because it feels a bit, you can start to feel like, am I being too personal if I give feedback like that? Or am I going to be, so So my theory is if you really care about not just your success, but the overall success, you will be candid. And I think giving and receiving feedback is an art form that most organizations still are on a journey to figure out, right? A lot of people stop short.
Yeah.
But if there is the clarity that all feedback is with the intent of getting to a better place to jointly and collectively, and people actually seek that feedback as opposed to feel defensive, then I think magic starts to happen. And then culture comes alive, right?
Okay.
An honest culture, a culture of care is one where people are not afraid to speak up and make their voice heard. And it's for the organization to, it kind of links to the point about inclusion as well, right?
Yeah.
Inclusion is so important.
I'll ask you about that. Yeah.
I mean, quite often voices get lost because there isn't the encouragement, the mechanism, the platform for their voices to be heard. And there isn't the clarity in terms of how far can I go in saying something. So
I think that's very interesting. So in all these conversations I have, think customer is a way to bring people's attention. And I think you've summed that up extremely well. But you've also said something that hasn't been spelled out in some of the conversations I had before, which is that idea of actually being candid with each other. We at techUK, we asked our team a little while ago, what are the values we should live by, and by extension our members, because we do want to be representative, but also helping the members. And we came up with a number of those, and in particular, there were two that came out of the five. One was courage, so feel empowered, feel courageous, and the other was respect. And actually, you respect people if you tell them like it is, don't you?
100%. I think for me, respect for the individual is above all else.
I know that phrase from IBM.
Super important, right?
Yeah.
Because then everything else that follows, that it's with the right intent.
Yeah.
And that is the cardinal principle, really.
Yeah.
But again, there are times when you'll have a heated discussion. You probably even have friction. But if the overarching clarity is on, it's with good intent, and there's respect in that, right?
Yeah.
That's I think critical, and that binds it all together.
And it doesn't mean that you don't want people to perform. You're a high performance culture. I mean, your recent results demonstrate that, don't they? So having that approach and still be demanding and say, we need to do a good job for the customer, we need to do a good job for the shareholder and the stakeholders. That's about high performance as well, isn't it?
So one of the, I suppose, not a moment, but a journey of self-realization for me has been the idea that leadership is about managing between paradoxes, right? So what do I mean by that? When we think about different ends of the spectrum, the idea that a leader has to be both compassionate and demanding, has to be both patient and impatient, has to drive empowerment and decentralization and centralization, etc. Right? It does feel like, at least seemingly, that you're kind of driving different paradoxical sort of approaches, but the reality is leadership is not this or that, right? It's the balance in the middle, and it's the mixture of both. So it's the and, not an or.
Right.
And quite often and I think the simplified version is, well, it's this or that. Well, it's not. It's both. And that's where I think the magic is, which is as long as there's a realization that I can be compassionate and demanding, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But a lot of people then end up sort of, there are no shades in between. You've got to be empathetic, but you can't be assertive, or you can't be demanding. Wow.
Yeah, it doesn't work. And that's so a movie you said about movies, the push me pull you model, maybe.
Indeed.
Or perhaps I'm simplifying it too much. A little bit on inclusion, Vivek, if I may, because our previous president, Jacqueline Rojas, used to say to us, don't talk about diversity, talk about inclusion, because diversity is almost can be a numbers game. Inclusion is actually making all people feel they can contribute. We don't have fantastic stats in the industry, do we, on getting diverse and inclusive voices in? And some of the newer companies are actually worse than some of the more established companies. How do you tackle that in NTT?
Yeah, so I think, again, like most companies, I think we are on a journey. I don't think any company can claim to have kind of cracked it because I suppose in the end, it's also a case of there's no destination. It's a case of how quickly can you progress and do better on that front. So at NTT, for example, one of the things that, among other things, right, one of the things that's made a big difference is just the spotlighting and the tone from the top about how important is this to us? Where does it sit among the many other things that we do? Mm-hmm. So our CEO has personally sponsored and championed this, and his chief of staff is empowered and accountable for D&I across the entire organization.
Okay.
She is super passionate about this topic. So for us, this is a conversation that happens quite frequently. It's not a once in a while, International Women's Day, and we put something on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's a thing that perpetuates and frequently kind of progresses through the organization. And then to make it real, we have made some clear commitments. So for instance, we've said by 2025, 50% of all of our workforce will come from one or more diversity categories, big commitment. 50% of all of the exco in the business will come from a diversity, will be female, right? That's by 2025 again, and so forth. So I think when we talk about setting goals and targets for D&I, it's not as simple as we set the target and then we think we've done something. At the end of the day, we need to find the talent in the market, make it happen. But we've set the bar though, and we said that's what we're going for. Everyone else now needs to rally. Then we cascade that through how we hire, how we screen, etc. I think most organizations are in some shape or form in that journey. There are obviously bigger considerations around availability of talent as well as growing that talent.
Yeah.
And so forth. So, but as I said, right, it's important to not just kind of set the targets, but also to have someone who is really sponsored at the right level and has the passion to drive it. This is not a programmatic exercise alone. It's very much about passion, hearts, and minds, and that's how we drive it.
And that's very interesting. One of the themes that we've had at techUK is the moving us from being consumers of talent. Because as tech companies, we want talent to do stuff for us, but we have to move to be producers. So we ought to take in more people than we need, skill them up. And it's self-serving in a way because they go out into your customers, they go out into your collaborators, innovators, and so on. Vivek, I'm conscious of time, and I do want to give the online audience and the people here a chance to ask some questions. But what I'd like to pick up on your Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which of course came up with Wikipedia, didn't it, and the internet? Yeah. The idea that you could have all human knowledge or all knowledge, and you could ask it, and you could find a way to do it through the book, and also translate. Choose your own one, Google Translate or another one. These things are now here. I've had a theory that actually, if you want to get a good perspective on tech, then it's Doctor Who episodes, which exposes the way that fundamentally computers work, which is following instruction sets. And if you do something outside of the instruction set, they're not always able to. So he always defeats the massive terrible villain, doesn't he, by doing something paradoxical. But the other one was Star Trek. And all the things that we used to see in the late 60s and early 70s, talking to the computer, who thought?
Indeed.
The sort of medical scanner, the tricorder or whatever.
Tricorder, yeah.
Yeah. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're all here now. I mean, the only thing we're missing is the beam me up Scotty, isn't it? We've got the lasers as well now, but
life imitates art.
So can I, maybe just say to you, you've talked a little bit about what NTT does in terms of fundamental technology breakthroughs. Putting your perspective on that, what do you think is the big challenge facing us in 23, and what do you think may come?
Sure.
Going forward, what should we watch out for? Is it all metaverse? Is it all generative AI? What is it?
So I'll pick a couple of quick step back moments in time. So in May 2017, NHS got attacked through the WannaCry virus.
Yeah.
Or ransomware rather. That affected 80 NHS trusts. It led to the cancellation of about 20,000 appointments. It eventually cost NHS nearly £100 million. 5 years on, last year, August 22, one of the IT suppliers to NHS also got hit by ransomware that again affected the, in this case, the 111 service and some of the dispatching and, so on and so on. Another example, and this one was just when I first read this, I thought, where will this stop? 2021, Northern Railway invested 17 million pounds to install 621 ticket machines, self-service ticket machines, digital self-service ticket machines in 420 stations. Within 2 months of installation, they got hacked. I mean, who would have thought ticket machines, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop anywhere. So I think my point is, to your point about what's coming. What's coming is what's already in front of us and has been happening and is getting worse and worse. Organizations today are complex, online, real-time, and digital. And the attack surface is increasing and has increased tremendously in the last few years, right? The remote work, hybrid working, and whatnot. And with more IoT devices, more edge, et cetera, et cetera. So with complexity comes more vulnerability and more security risk. So guarding against that risk will become the single biggest topic. It is and will continue to be the single biggest topic, I think. Because as organizations innovate, they kind of take on more technology, do new things, and they solve for legacy, and they again get to modern technology. The attack surface keeps on increasing. So when we look at things inside cyber around, and I don't want to get into a lot of geek speak around web application firewalls and software web gateways, and mainly let's think of it as managing identity and access in a hybrid working world with many more endpoints. That will become, it is and will become an increasingly bigger challenge for companies. So how they adopt technology to tackle that, as well as driving behavior, enablement, training, will be a big deal. Right? So
that's the big one.
That's the big one.
And if you look at your, I won't ask you to name any, but if you look across CEOs in the buying community, do they understand that?
Oh, absolutely.
And do they know how to do it?
So to your previous point, the first thing I must say that this is no longer a technology risk topic. It's a board level business risk topic. I don't think this is now lost on anyone.
They've got it.
They've got it, but solving it is a whole different matter.
Yeah.
Because it's not as easy as I'll buy some more tech and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Because
the more tech you get, the bigger the
it's about behaviors also. It's also about, there's always the unknown. And that links to the second point, which is, assuming it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, then you really need to be spending time and effort in looking at business continuity and planning for, resilience.
Yeah.
Because, if not just ransomware, it could be any form of black swan events, right? Natural disasters, outages.
Yeah.
So there's being resilient and ready and to continue your business in that scenario takes on a whole different meaning.
And that's the big conversation you're finding yourself increasingly having.
Yeah, absolutely. So when companies are looking at connectivity, when they look at security in the cloud, the security for apps, for data, securing all that, right, is not simple. Yes, modern technology is helping, but it's a big topic. So I think those two things in terms of 2023, that's sort of one broad sort of two things I would say from in there. And then the other thing is around as companies continue to go further in investing in tech. And we all know the old adage of, it's important to think about the business rather than technology and put business in front of technology. But the reality is there's still a lot of technology as a hammer chasing a nail, right? So the solution is AI, what's the question? The solution is cloud, what's the question? Like, we need to get past that.
Yeah.
And that needs, again, old adage, but business and IT kind of coming together to decide what makes sense and how to prioritize. So, but I still think there's a lot of exciting opportunity coming up with how to harness the power of cloud. And very soon it won't be you and me talking. ChatGPT will have 2 instances on either side. Be possibly more fun. I don't know.
Well, we can play football instead, or esports at least. Look, I want to just give a chance. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we to let some other people ask you something if there are questions in the room. And Sue, you may have some questions online, but is there a question in the room? We got one here. Have we got a microphone so the online community can hear? And does it work? That's the other question on the microphone. Can you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Colm Shorten, JLL Data Centers. Thank you, Vivek, for the interesting conversation. You grounded your company in the 17 Sustainability Development Goals. You talked a lot about the seagrass as a carbon sink. When you look at your data center environment, what are NTT doing in order to make their data centers more sustainable to meet both regs and the challenge we face in the environment?
Sure. So firstly, we've again set ourselves the goal of being, as a company, across our own operations, the goal of being carbon neutral by 2030. That's a huge commitment, right, for the kind of business we are. So we made that as an overarching commitment in terms of our own operations, right? So that's the first thing. Within there, we've also made the commitment to use 100% renewable energy in all of our data centers by 2030. Part of that is what we're doing around new data centers that we're building. So if you look at our London 1 data center, it runs already on 100% renewable energy, fully green data center. We've also invested in our own captive base stations. For example, our DC in India, we have our own substation in that, and that's all on renewable energy. So there's a focus on renewable energy and managing the environmental criteria across our various data centers. I don't think the solar farm will happen like anytime soon. It'll take a while, but I think the idea really then is across all of these, it's the hard grind, right? There's no easy answer because data center by data center, what are we doing? But main focus is really around energy consumption, green energy, and then we have to somewhere use carbon credits and so forth. So it's a mix of treatments, but the key is we have already committed to 100% renewable energy by 2030. That's kind of where we're going.
Thank you. Sue, do we have I know we got more questions over here, but do you have a question?
I do. Thank you for those online. Hi, everyone. I actually, one already got answered around culture of NTT. So I have two, and I'll put them together, Vivek, if that's all right. So there was one question that I don't know if you can answer very quickly. Does NTT have branches in Africa? And then one of the other questions was, what are the biggest challenges NTT faces today, and how well prepared are you to tackle them?
Okay. So
that's a big question.
So first one, do we have branches in Africa? If you're buying, we are selling. Yes.
That wasn't in the question, but I'm sure.
So we have one of the group companies that integrated to form NTT Limited was Dimension Data. So there's a very strong South African heritage, and so yeah, we do have a good footprint there. On the second one around our challenges, I think the first challenge is, and I'd speak specifically to NTT Limited, right? Because go much broader, but I just stick to Limited. Firstly, the fact that, because as I said, we are this new old company, we are still a kind of a new brand that not many people know about, right? Because we've suddenly come up by integrating these other companies. And then now we've kind of modernized ourselves to be digital and be in the market. So first and foremost is getting our story out there so people know what we do. NTT is a great brand, everyone kind of broadly, but as a business unit and as a corporation inside the group, what we do is still a bit of a hidden secret, right? So we need to show up. So that's the first thing. Second is taking the combination of the assets and platforms that we have, the segments and the industries that we are dealing with, being able to go from the current provider sets, which tend to be in the infrastructure space, you get the usual suspects that people run with for the longest time. And to demonstrate the transformative value and the reason to look at an entity, we need to get better at that. I think we have a lot of goodness in what we do. We need to get better at translating that for the market, and we are learning that. Because it can be a tough kind of subject around We are not at the front end of a consumer business. We are at the infrastructure end of a enterprise business. So showing up and engaging clients and demonstrating the value of what we can do. So for example, a good example is I'll take one product among others that I could take. Over the last 18, 20 months, we have taken what was our traditional offer around managed campus and revamped and redesigned their entire architecture to make it a modern AI ops oriented architecture. And so when we talk about self-healing, self-closing, automation, I think we've achieved, some of our partners are telling us, you've got something that is actually best in class. Why aren't you out there? We're like, well, we just kind of got here now. So we need to take the work that we've done and take it out to the market.
Have we got another question in the room? Or, yeah, one in the middle there. There we go.
I think this is a question almost for both of you, right? So, Julian, I was heading in to, I think, your last event, and
You introduce?
Oh, AD Walter from Simfix, right? And I bumped into a senior IBMer, right? And we had a chat about the reverse from cloud back to on-prem, right? And I just wondered with Vivek, what are NTT feeling about? You talked about the vulnerability, the security, and that sort of thing. What are NTT seeing in that reverse?
Vivek, go for it.
Great question. So I think there is a circularity, yes, to where some businesses have got to, but there's enough in the media talking about sticker shock and with rising energy prices, what's happening and so forth. And it's back to the answer is cloud. What's the question? I think they're starting to dawn on different companies, depending on their kind of workload. If there's a predictable, stable workload, if there's a certain quantum of what you need to store, secure, and manage, there are examples now clearly coming up where it makes more sense to not be in the cloud. But I would say there's a danger of headline surfing around the bulk of the market is still heading down the direction of a multi-cloud model. Enterprises have tough choices to make around the multitude of problems they need to solve for around legacy. And cloud gives them a fast start in some respects. I would almost sort of, yes, so we're seeing some of that, yes, but are we seeing it like a major secular thing? No, it's too early. I think it's too early. And I think given that the journey itself is sort of not even halfway through in terms of workloads moving to cloud, there's some distance to go. And the bigger question now is, with where enterprises want to take their own business, what makes the most sense? They need to think carefully about that, and there's a journey. Instead of just jumping in and saying, let's do the lift and shift, then we figure out the next stage, and then me, right? So that's the thing where there needs to be a double take before you kind of just take step one. Yeah, it's not an obvious sort of thing right now. But yeah.
I'll give a perspective on this from my point of view. So I was a retailer, actually. I maybe shouldn't reveal this, the head of techUK. Didn't actually do any tech until I did join the IBM company selling to retailers. That's how I got into tech. And when I did, I thought retail is fashion, and it's everybody's onto this, and it's they come up for that, and then the next one is this. Here I am now with the logical guys and girls. So everything's going to be logical. We're in the biggest fashion business in the world in tech, and people continue to say, okay, this is the new thing. Let's go to the new thing. Everything's got to be blockchain. Everything's got to be generative AI. Everything's got to be cloud. Everything. And the answer which you've given, Vivek, is topographies should be about meeting the business requirement in the most sensible way. And there isn't one size fits all. And different topographies, different technologies have different qualities, and choose them.
Yeah, I mean, look. Again, we've all seen this, right? Sometimes, and not in a bad way, but in a well-meaning way. Sometimes these are political choices around what will move the business forward. So there's no one sort of ultra logical way of deciding these things, but the cost can be significant if you're not really qualifying hard. But yeah, I mean, new era.
Yeah, but again, the advantage, as we all saw during the pandemic, was businesses were able very quickly to move online, whether it was on-prem or in a hyperscaler or their own cloud. And there's a lot of benefits from cloud architecture, even on-prem, aren't there?
Yep. Yep, indeed.
So,
Can I cite a quick example, which I think ties a number of these themes together? It'll sound like a bit of a plug, but really it's an example I want to cite more than say it's NTT. And this ties together themes around technology, human experience, and diversity and inclusion, and many other things. So, any cycling enthusiasts in the room? A few. But kind of every day you can see the number of people cycling. It's great to see it's kind of really picked up and it's going. So, Tour de France, everyone will have heard of Tour de France. So NTT has been working with the organizing body of Tour de France called ASO, Amaury Sports Organization, for the last 9 years, I would say, 8 or 9 years, 9 years, to transform the sport of cycling. So through the journey of, when it was in 2015, an analog event, and, it's quite difficult to track what was going on to where we are today. We have deployed a digital fabric that comprises of cloud, IoT, analytics, machine learning, digital twinning, think of anything you can in terms of the latest buzzword, except cryptocurrencies. Everything is, or DLT, everything is in there. But what's happened as a result is, right, the sport has, the whole Tour de France experience has completely transformed for fans, for organizers, for participants. And we've in the bargain created the world's biggest digital stadium and an entire experience around the sport. And the diversity inclusion point is that in 2022, for the first time after 30 years, Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift was launched, which is the women's tour.
yeah.
And using the same technology, we are now going, or we have already, kind of elevated the experience of women cycling and bring it closer to passionate fans who want to get engaged in the sport. And hopefully that brings more women into cycling and Tour de France. So that, I think, is a great nexus of human experience, technology, and putting tech to work for good.
Well, I think it's a pretty good note to finish on. And I think we're out of time. In fact, we're over time. I'm not very good at keeping the time on these. But,
Don't look at me.
Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vivek. It's been a
Delighted.
great pleasure talking to you. And I've enjoyed, Vivek and I had a couple of other conversations. I've enjoyed some of your movie analogies greatly. And I do think you've given us a real insight to what we hoped, which is what is NTT? What is its purpose in life? How does it go about that? And also a little bit about what makes you tick and how you managed to lead the team.
Julian, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you. That was a delight.
So remains for me to close. I think we've got some drinks and things outside. We will do a thank you in a minute, Sue, but I've got to say something else. Sue's getting ready to say. So she keeps me honest all the time. But there will be some drinks outside for some networking. Sorry, the online people, maybe you can get a cup of tea or a beer or something, whatever you want as well. And one other thing for me just to say is at techUK, one of the things we are looking at is, can we highlight some people within our member companies who have driven a particularly strong result in the 4 areas that we say that we're trying to do with our members, which is positive outcomes for tech, for people, society, the economy, and the planet. So we have now a President's Award, in which we're looking for people to put themselves forward. Somebody from your company. You have to be a techUK member company. I know there are some non-members. Another reason to join. What could be better? And hopefully we'll get somebody from NTT.
For sure, yeah.
Coming forward with a story of what they've done for customers, for communities, for the stakeholders, in order to achieve something in those 4 categories. But let me finish again, Vivek. Thank you very much for coming in today. I've enjoyed this tremendously. It's been great to get to know more about you and your company.
Thank you.
Thank you.